and I'm the soil scientist at the Allerton project. It was a replicated experiment on the field. We had plots that had been compacted by driving a tractor up and down many times, and then after we tested to make sure there was a good level of compaction, we had some plots that were ploughed to alleviate the compaction, some plots that had a low disturbance subsoiler to again alleviate the compaction in a slightly different way, and then some plots that we just drilled straight into the compacted areas. One of the pieces of equipment we've been using in the field is the Penetrometer. It measures the resistance of the soil profile all the way down to depth, and it tells us if there's any underlying compaction issues and what depth it is in the field. The most interesting result I found in the experiment was in the greenhouse gas emissions. So we measured CO2 and nitrous oxide emissions from all of the plots. We found that the cultivated plots, so the ploughed and the low disturbance subsoil plots, had slightly higher CO2 emissions in the summer and slightly higher again in the winter. The most interesting result was that nitrous oxide was no difference in the summer between all the plots, but in the winter, when the ground was slightly waterlogged, it combined with the compacted plots that hadn't had any alleviation and caused a spike in nitrous oxide emissions. Because nitrous oxide is around 300 times more efficient greenhouse gas than CO2, this really does make a big difference to the overall greenhouse gas emissions from the plots, and meant that in the winter time there was no overall difference between the total greenhouse gas emissions we measured in the cultivated and uncultivated plots. However, you are still making a saving because you're not using that fuel that you would be using to cultivate the plots. So there is a slight gain still in the uncultivated plots. But it was very interesting to see that spike in nitrous oxide in the winter. The other interesting result we found was that earthworms were consistently lower in the cultivated plots. This is because cultivation can have a big impact on earthworms by destroying their burrows and actually by physically crushing the earthworms when the cultivation is happening through the field. So the populations were slightly higher in the plots that hadn't been disturbed. So the economic impacts suggested that with direct drilling into a severely compacted field, you did get a yield decline, which is unsurprising really, and that ploughing or using a low disturbance subsoiler were equally good at influencing that and getting rid of that yield decline by alleviating that compaction, which led to an improvement in your overall profitability. From our stakeholder feedback, we've led to a new experiment where we're using a soil moisture sensor that our network of farmers have access to. They can look at it and tell what the moisture concentration is at different depths to give them information about when the right time might be to use a low disturbance subsoiler.